Hello and welcome to Race for the White House, our daily show on the 2024 US presidential elections. On today's show, we tell you about Kamala Harris's new media blitz and what her spate of recent interviews tells us about her. Also on the show, we tell you about how a new book is making uncomfortable revelations about Donald Trump's relationship with Russia's President Vladimir Putin. All of this and much more, so let's get started. First up, our top story is about Kamala Harris making her rounds in the media as the election draws closer. With no more debates scheduled, these interviews are her big opportunity to connect with voters. She sat down with famous podcasts called Her Daddy, as well as famous media personalities like Howard Stern. In these interviews, she's trying to show a more personal side, while also making her case as a strong leader. Now, recently she sat down with Stern for one of her most revealing interviews. She opened up about her daily life, including her morning routine. Harris shared that she works out on an elliptical for about 30 to 45 minutes every day. And during her workout, she watches the show Morning Joe on MSNBC. It's a routine that shows that she stays up to date with the news and gets moving before starting her busy day. She also talked about her favorite cereals, Raisin Bran and Special K. These personal details are meant to make her more relatable to voters. She's even revealed that she's a big fan of Formula One racing. Her favorite driver is Lewis Hamilton, one of the sport's most famous and successful athletes. Harris also joked about her husband Doug Emhoff and their different tastes in music. While he's a big fan of bands like Depeche Mode, Harris says that she grew up on hip-hop. But the two of them still agree on artists like Prince and U2. As fun as these moments were, Harris also had to address more serious topics. She slammed Donald Trump for recent reports that he sent COVID-19 testing machines to Vladimir Putin during the pandemic. Harris was also clearly angry at Trump, calling Trump's actions surreal and accusing him of being too friendly with dictators. She also talked about the threats she's received throughout her career, including as her time as a prosecutor in California. Even though Harris faces danger, she's made clear that she refuses to live in fear. Now, why exactly is Harris doing all of these interviews? With the election just weeks away, this is Harris's last chance to reach a wide range of voters. She's appearing on everything from news programs like 60 Minutes to more casual shows like The View and podcasts like Call Her Daddy. It's a strategy to connect with different audiences who are not always political and to show a more relatable and human side. Remember that a large number of voters have said that they don't really know what Kamala Harris stands for. This is her opportunity to change that. At the same time, she's also trying to demonstrate her strength as a leader. And these interviews could be crucial for undecided voters who are still making up their minds about who to support. By revealing more about her personal life, Harris hopes to build a connection with the American people. She's also showing that she's ready to take on Trump and any criticisms he throws at her. With less than a month to go, it remains to be seen whether these final interviews could be the push that Harris needs to win over voters. Moving on, Donald Trump is making Hurricanes Helene and Milton a political flashpoint as the election looms on November 5th. Trump is pushing misinformation about these two natural disasters, including claims that federal authorities have spent disaster relief funds on migrants and not American citizens. Trump is also accusing Kamala Harris and the Biden administration of being incompetent in how they've handled the storms. Harris, as vice president, has been involved in the federal response to these natural disasters, but hasn't been the main face of it. She's traveled to the hardest hit states on America's southeastern coast, has met with federal officials, and has tried to show that she cares. But as a candidate, Harris also cannot avoid the politics of this. Her campaign has fired back at Trump and accused him of spreading lies. They've also used clips of his rallies to show Trump's inflammatory rhetoric. Harris has also slammed him for turning two natural disasters into a political weapon. Her campaign launched an ad targeting Trump for politicizing federal aid efforts during his time in office. At the same time, there's also been a war of words between Harris and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis over the preparations for Hurricane Milton. This political back and forth is happening as states struggle to recover from Hurricane Helene. Remember that this was a natural disaster that has killed over 200 people across America's southeastern coast. This tragedy is being overshadowed by politics, and experts warn that politicizing storms will not help voters who need help. But natural disasters do have a history of impacting presidential campaigns. Federal authorities' mishandling of Hurricane Andrew in 1992 did hurt the administration of President George H.W. Bush. Meanwhile, in 2012, the superstorm Sandy allowed Barack Obama to project leadership in a tight electoral race. All of this shows how these natural disasters and storms can actually change the dynamics of an election campaign. Now, Trump is using Hurricanes Helene and Milton to push a political agenda. He's claimed that Biden has not returned calls from governors of Republican states, and he's also falsely said that federal authorities are only giving hurricane victims $750 in aid. He's also said that federal authorities are diverting funds to help undocumented immigrants. Meanwhile, Trump has started a GoFundMe campaign to raise around $7 million for those who have been affected by this catastrophe. However, it's important to note that governors from both political parties, Democrats and Republicans, have praised the federal response to Hurricane Helene. But with Hurricane Milton now on the horizon, Trump is doubling down on this rhetoric. He told radio host Ben Shapiro that North Carolina residents said that there was no real support from federal authorities. Trump also claimed that people asked him to call Elon Musk to provide Starlink satellite internet. And he also took another shot at Harris, saying that she doesn't know what she's doing. Harris is now facing a challenge on two fronts: helping with the disaster response and also defending against Trump's attacks in a tight election. With just a month to go for November 5th, Hurricanes Helene and Milton could be the October surprise that reshapes the outcome. A bombshell new book is sure to cause political headaches for Donald Trump. Investigative journalist Bob Woodward, who is world famous for his reporting on the Watergate scandal back in the 1970s, is set to release his new book, War. This book dives deep into Biden, Trump, and their handling of global conflicts. But the book also reveals new details about Trump and particularly his relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin. According to the book, Trump secretly sent COVID-19 testing equipment to Putin during the pandemic. Woodward writes that Putin asked Trump to keep the shipment of this equipment quiet. Woodward's book also details multiple phone calls between Trump and Putin since Trump left office in 2021. Trump has allegedly had as many as 7 calls with Putin after 2021, according to Woodward's book. In one scene in the book, which is described by American media organizations who have managed to get access to Woodward's book, Trump asked a senior aide to leave the room so he could have a private conversation with Putin. Now, Trump has denied the reports in the book and has termed them false. Trump's aides have also denied that they were aware of any of these calls. His spokesperson, Stephen Chung, claimed that Trump gave absolutely no access to Woodward for the book. He even called the story in the book made up. Now, this comes as Trump has faced strong criticism from Kamala Harris and the Democrats for his relationship with Putin. Trump has in the past praised the Russian dictator. He called Putin savvy and a genius for his invasion of Ukraine in 2022. And he did it again in a 2024 interview with Elon Musk. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris has turned this record against Trump and attacked him in their only presidential debate. She criticized him for sacrificing America's national interests in the interest of his friendship with Putin. But could these latest revelations have an impact on the outcome of the election on November 5th? Joining us now is our White House correspondent Rohit Sharma to help us decode what's happening with this latest scandal. Rohit, thank you so much for joining us. These revelations in this book by Bob Woodward, what exactly do they tell us?
Well, very interesting revelations, if you were to call them. I mean, look, yesterday we were talking about if there's going to be an October surprise, and could this well be an October surprise? We'll only have to wait and find out. But the book comes out October 15, and Bob Woodward is obviously known, one of the renowned journalists. I mean, it's still, dishing out details from within the White House, and he's been covering White House since the 70s. I mean, so he obviously has a lot of credibility when he says something, and when he says the fact that President Trump's made at least 7 phone conversations with President Vladimir Putin after he's left the White House. That obviously is going to raise some eyebrows. And the fact that he offered and he in fact ended up sending COVID testing kits to Putin might not sit well with some of the independent voters.
Rohit, could you also tell us how voters are going to respond to this new controversy? Is it really uncommon to be friends with leaders of foreign countries? Although I imagine Vladimir Putin is very, very different than most foreign leaders.
Well, it's an uncharted territory in the sense that yes, you can. I mean, you are, as a private citizen of the United States, you could have friendships, or you could have conversations with world leaders. I mean, it's not an unknown. In the sense of, like, we know there have been cases where, for example, President Clinton, once he left office, he's obviously met with a lot of government leaders across the nation, across the world. So yes, in a way, I think it's not uncommon. But the fact that when your first presidential campaign in 2016, I'm talking about Trump here, was essentially surrounded by these allegations of his relations with Russia and what he ended up doing in Russia, and Russia trying to help him win the election, which he actually did in 2016. And the fact that now he's touting that he has such a cordial relationship with Vladimir Putin that he could just get him on the phone and end the war. Kind of tells you that there is some sense of camaraderie, if you were to use that word, between President Trump and Vladimir Putin. And again, that could be understood by the Trump orbit or the Russians. But will that translate, or would that understanding translate into the voters, and would they be able to understand that? I think that's the large question. Today, again, with those all revelations, we also saw some revelations from the Biden's time in the White House, and so the campaign, the Harris campaign, did not latch onto it as quickly as you would assume it. But in the coming days, you'll probably see some of the surrogates talking about this as we move ahead in this election cycle.
Rohit, could you also tell us a little bit about whether the United States is preparing for election interference? We heard about it in 2016. We heard about it in 2020. Will we see advanced preparations by the US government to counter foreign election interference in this time's election?
Well, it is very, very, important time in election. The intelligence agencies have obviously talked about how foreign powers want to influence election in the U.S. They've talked about Iran, they've talked about China, they talked about Russia and some other countries. And look, I think the Americans are prepared that there would be some, intervention or interference from foreign powers. I mean, we talked about how Israel, by not doing a ceasefire, is actually influencing the U.S. elections. So yes, I think the Americans are prepared for it. Vladimir Putin has had very rough and tough years with President Biden. That was also revealed in this book, and he may want to see a more likable person from his perspective, that is Donald Trump, back in the White House. So does he have an impetus to do this? Yes, absolutely. He would want to be able to influence it. But at the same time, I think the American system has matured, and the intelligence agencies have matured. The social media companies have matured since 2016. So I think there will be definitely some interference, some level of influence, probably covertly, that we probably would not know until there's a report that comes out 2, 3, 4 years from now. But I think the agencies are much prepared, very well prepared to counter some of these things. And as I've said, it's American elections. Everybody's got a stake in it. So we'll have to wait and watch what happens. But President Trump right now, is doing well and it is possible that he could be the next president of the United States, which could eventually be helpful for President Putin, because obviously now that we know that they have been talking, so looks like there is some level of understanding between the two leaders.
Right, Rohit. Thank you so much for joining us. And now it's time to turn to our segment Poll Watch, where we talk numbers. With less than a month to go for the US presidential polls, the race remains tight. Vice-President Kamala Harris maintains a narrow lead nationally, but it's still a neck-to-neck battle in swing states. So let's take a look at the two presidential contenders and how they're doing in the polls today. According to the New York Times Siena poll that we use regularly, Harris is leading in the national polls with a 49% approval rating, while Trump is trailing at 46%. In the swing state of Michigan, Harris has a 49-47 advantage over Trump. Meanwhile, in Pennsylvania and Nevada, Harris again has a narrow lead with 49% of public support to Trump's 48%. In the state of Wisconsin, Harris is maintaining a lead at 50%, while Trump is at 48%. And in the state of Arizona, Trump has taken a lead with 49% of support, while Harris is now at 47%. And finally, in the states of Georgia and North Carolina, Trump is leading with 49% to Harris's 48%. With just a few weeks left to go for the elections, the polls remain tight. And now it's time to bring you some updates from US politics that you might have missed. First up, Donald Trump's campaign is targeting sports fans with ads criticizing Kamala Harris for her stance on transgender issues. Trump ads airing during NFL, college football, and baseball games take aim at Harris's stance on this key issue. One of these ads runs with the tagline, "Kamala is for they, them. President Trump is for you." Trump's team is leveraging this issue to argue that Democrats are pushing an extreme cultural agenda that runs against American values. Trump's campaign says that the ads will be effective in winning voters over. Although past attempts to do this have been unsuccessful, Trump continues to promote anti-transgender policies as a core part of his platform, highlighting gender issues to distinguish his campaign from that of Harris. Next, the United States Justice Department has charged an Afghan national, Nasir Ahmed Tawhidi, with conspiracy to conduct an election day terrorist attack. Tawhidi, who is living in Oklahoma City, was supposed to be carrying out this attack on behalf of ISIS. He's 27 years old and attempted to provide material support to ISIS and acquired AK-47s as well as ammunition. Now, Tawhidi also liquidated his family's assets and participated in pro-ISIS online groups. He's also in the past accessed ISIS propaganda and contributed to a charity linked to funneling money to ISIS. He was arrested by federal authorities who set up a meeting between him and an undercover federal agent. During this meeting, Tawhidi tried to buy weaponry and was arrested as soon as the deal went through. And finally, Kamala Harris raised $361 million in August, nearly tripling Donald Trump's fall. This is far more than the $113 million raised by her Republican rival Donald Trump. Harris now has $404 million in cash reserves for her final sprint to election day. Trump's political operation, meanwhile, has $295 million, which showcases the massive financial gulf between the two candidates. Harris has raised over $615 million since July, when President Joe Biden ended his re-election bid. Her campaign says that this is a history-making effort, and nearly $3 million have contributed to the campaign in August. 1.3 million of those were first-time contributors. The campaign expects to raise over $1 billion by election day, and Harris's campaign manager praised the diverse coalition backing Harris. The campaign is already spending around $370 million on ads. This massive financial advantage has allowed the Harris campaign to spend millions of dollars on ads, build new campaign offices, and hire thousands of staffers in key battleground states. But despite this fundraising advantage, the Harris team still anticipates a close election. That's all we have for you today on this edition of Race to the White House. Please do catch us again on India Today Global.